Welcome back to The Cellar. Now, with Halloween just around the corner, I wanted to do something that is a bit of a departure from the content I typically make on this channel. Typically, I cover real-life stories of heroic survival, tragic death, and unyielding mystery. But in today's video, I wanted to have a little bit of fun and dive into my top 10 underrated horror films to watch this upcoming Halloween. I want to start off first by saying that these films are in no particular order. These are all movies that I've enjoyed over the years, and I wanted to give them some extra recognition as I feel like many of them have been vastly underrated. And on that note, let's dive into the list. Number 10. Frozen. Not to be confused with its cheery Disney counterpart, is a 2010 American psychological survival horror film, written and directed by Adam Green, and starring Shawn Ashmore, Kevin Zegers, and introduces Emma Bell in her film debut. It tells the story of three friends that wind up stranded in a chairlift after a day of skiing. Stuck in a precarious position, the three friends are forced to make life or death choices in order to survive and get down. The film itself features a minimalist setup, but manages to deliver intense scenes and scenarios. Now, one complaint the film received was that of the acting, and in parts I will say it's not always top-notch. But this is ultimately a small-budget horror film, and it delivers enough suspenseful moments while also carrying with it some heartfelt moments that truly make you invest in the characters you're watching. The film itself was shot entirely practically, meaning no soundstage, nor green screen, nor CGI effects. The actors and actresses were truly suspended over 50 feet in the air on the side of a real mountain in Utah. I will also add that there are scenes in this film that are tough to watch, but some of the best moments in the film are ones where the director solely relies on the reaction of the actors rather than constantly throwing gore in your face. To summarize, this film was one I stumbled upon many years ago. After viewing it, I found that it really stuck with me, and I think if any of you give it a chance, you would enjoy the ride it brings you on. Number 9. Splinter is a 2008 American horror film directed by Toby Wilkins and starring Shea Whigham, Paulo Costanzo, and Jill Wagner. It was filmed near Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The film is about a group of people trapped in an isolated gas station while being stalked by a voracious splinter-like parasite that transforms its still-living victims into deadly hosts. A young couple and an escaped convict must find a way to work together to survive their horrifying predicament. Like the prior movie Frozen, this film primarily takes place in one setting, a rural and isolated gas station. For me, the acting highlight of this film is Shea Whigham. He plays the escaped convict, and you may know him from a film like the newly released Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning or from the TV series Boardwalk Empire. His character, for me, is really what ultimately makes or breaks this film. Across the board, all the characters do a fine job with what's presented to them as they fight to try and survive a splinter-like parasite that turns its hosts into zombie-like vessels. This film is minimalistic in its approach, making the survival scenario the sole focus of the film, while leaving a lot of ambiguity to what the splinter-like parasite actually is or where it even came from. If you're looking for a film with thrills, scares, and some horrifying body horror, I think this film will be right up your alley. Number 8. Creep is a 2014 American found-footage psychological horror film directed by Patrick Bryce in his directorial debut. It's based on a story written by Bryce and Mark Duplass, who both star in this film. Filmed as found footage, Bryce portrays a videographer assigned to record an eccentric client played by Duplass. The story begins with struggling videographer Aaron, who accepts an assignment to travel to a remote cabin in Crestline, where he meets his client Joseph. Joseph explains that he has an inoperable brain tumor and is expected to die before his pregnant wife Angela gives birth, so he wishes to have Aaron record a video diary for his unborn child. What ensues is a twisted mind game, which spirals out of control. Now, typically I would dive into more details, but this film is far better to go into without knowing too much about it. The ultimate highlight is Mark Duplass, in a role he wrote for himself and played to utter perfection. This film is ultimately more of a psychological foray, but it takes the approach of found footage and does it to absolute justice within its execution. There's also a follow-up film called Creep 2, and I highly recommend that if you have the time, sit down and watch both films back to back. They're a true gem amongst the myriad of found footage films that have been released over the years. Number 7. Cold Prey, or Frittvilt, is a 2006 Norwegian slasher film directed by Roar Uthaug. It premiered in Norway on October 13, 2006, and received positive reviews. It was hailed at the time as one of the best modern Norwegian horror movies. The movie is about 5 young Norwegians who head up to the mountains to enjoy a day of snowboarding. During said excursion, one of the friends breaks his leg. With night soon approaching, they manage to make their way to an abandoned hotel on the mountain where they hunker down to spend the night, unaware at the time that they are not alone. Cold Prey is a cold and ruthless slasher-style film, with the man hunting the friends down being something like a Norwegian mountaineer Michael Myers. There's tons of intense sequences and plenty of blood to go along with it. If you're someone who enjoys slasher films, then this should be right up your alley. I also highly recommend the second film in the franchise, Cold Prey 2, which happens to continue right from where the first film leaves off, which is perfect for a night of back-to-back horror films. Just make sure you have plenty of popcorn at the ready. Number 6. Hidden is a 2015 American psychological thriller film written and directed by the Duffer Brothers in their feature film debut. The film stars Alexander Skarsgård, Andrea Riseborough, and Emily Allen Lind. The movie is about an unknown strange outbreak that has devastated the United States. A family of 3, Ray, played by Alexander Skarsgård, Claire, played by Andrea Riseborough, and their daughter, Zoe, played by Emily Allen Lind, have taken refuge in an abandoned fallout shelter shortly after the catastrophe. There, they survive on minimal amounts of canned goods while they try to stay hidden from the monsters lurking outside. This is another minimalist film where a large portion of the story plays out in a small and cramped fallout shelter. Alexander Skarsgård is great in his role as the father of the family, while the supporting cast turn in strong performances as well. This movie is more of a slow burn and build-up kind of film that offers a unique twist that you probably won't see coming. As I've stated with some other films on this list, it's better if I don't dive too deep into the details of the film itself. It's better to go into this with little expectations and knowledge and just enjoy the ride it ultimately takes you on. Number 5. Ginger Snaps is a 2000 Canadian supernatural horror film directed by John Fawcett and written by Karen Walton. The film stars Emily Perkins and Catherine Isabelle as Bridget and Ginger Fitzgerald. They play a pair of morbid teenage sisters whose close bond is tested when Ginger is attacked and bitten by an unknown animal. Following the attack and during the next full moon, Ginger slowly starts to transform into a lycanthrope, aka a werewolf. The film, since released, has slowly developed a pretty large cult following, and it also has 2 follow-up films which I will say deserve a watch as well. The first film is the best of the series, but the sequel is solid and the third film goes in a very different direction while also bringing back the 2 sisters. Now, I won't say these films are overly scary, but I do think they are well made, and the use of lycanthropy as a metaphor for puberty is an interesting parallel, while the dark humor interlaced throughout fits perfectly within the narrative. The biggest highlight of this film is the acting from both sisters, which is stellar and really helps you buy into the morbid and unbreakable bond that these sisters have with one another. This, for me personally, has always been one of my all-time favorite films, and if you've never given the movie a chance, why not do so? Like, right now. Number 4, Return of the Living Dead 3 is a 1993 horror comedy film directed by Brian Yuzna and written by John Penny. It is the third film in the Return of the Living Dead film series, following Return of the Living Dead Part 2. The film takes place 5 years after the prior film in the series, when Kurt's girlfriend Julie, played by Melinda Clarke, is killed in a motorcycle accident. He then ends up using the secret zombie gas to reanimate Julie. When Julie comes back, she retains her sentience, but feels an uncontrollable drive to eat brains. Julie tries to stave off her hunger with Kurt, while the pair attempt to stay one step ahead of all of those pursuing them. Now, out of all the Return of the Living Dead films, this one is one I have gone back to and watched more times than I can count. Is this film a perfect movie? No. Is it a unique take on the zombie genre? Yes it is. One complaint I read about this film was that it lacked the campy nature the first two Return of the Living Dead films carried with them. But I feel in a lot of ways that's what makes this a much stronger film. This film is like Romeo and Juliet, only if Romeo was a neglected military colonel's son and Juliet was a pierced up late 80s, early 90s made-for-TV punk chick. This film won't be for everyone, but the acting is decent enough and the practical special effects are gory and make me yearn for the days before everything was glossed over with CGI. In particular, the effects used on Julie's character as the film progresses are brutal and creative and done to great effect. If you never gave this film a chance back in the day or have never even heard about the film at all, I highly recommend giving it a chance because it's a lot of fun, and as far as I'm concerned, it's always been extremely underrated. Number 3, The Strangers is a 2008 American psychological horror film written and directed by Brian Bertino. The film follows Kristen, played by Liv Tyler, and James, played by Scott Speedman, whose stay at a vacation home is disrupted by 3 masked criminals who infiltrate the home. Now for me, this film never got the love it deserved. I actually was given tickets to see an early screening of this film back in 2008. I can still remember going into it and not knowing much about the film. The thing that always stuck with me about this movie was the tension. There aren't a lot of films that manage to bring about such a tense atmosphere, but as I sat in the theater, I felt like I could cut the tension with a knife. As you probably have noticed, and I am noticing as I write this all out, this is another minimalistic film, with most of the runtime taking place within one house, and some scenes leading around the property itself. But the acting from Scott Speedman and Liv Tyler is fantastic, especially early on in the film. Now, I don't want to spoil anything for those that have not seen this movie, but the way the movie is shot, acted, along with the sound design, well, it truly all comes together to make one of my all-time favorite psychological slasher films. I can't recommend enough that you give this film a chance. I also want to add that the only way to watch this film is with the lights out and your undivided attention given. Number 2, Pandorum is a 2009 German-British science fiction horror film with elements of survival adventure. It's directed by Christian Albert and stars Dennis Quaid and the always fantastic Ben Foster. The movie starts with astronauts Peyton, played by Dennis Quaid, and Bauer, played by Ben Foster, as they both awake in a hypersleep chamber with no memory of who they are or what their mission might even be. While Peyton stays behind to monitor the radio transmitter, Bauer ventures out of the chamber into the seemingly abandoned spaceship. But it doesn't take long before both men quickly realize that they are not alone, and the fate of mankind hinges on what they do next. Now, this film, to me, plain and simply wasn't marketed correctly at release, which led to its subsequent bombing at the box office. But in 2009, I was always itching for something sci-fi horror, so I said, what the hell, and went and saw it opening weekend. Well, I am ultimately glad I did, because it's a really good film. In particular, the first half of the film or so is very dark and intense, and there's scenes that are very claustrophobic. The best part of this film is the unknown as you are taken on this journey with 2 men who don't remember anything at all. The movie does take a bit of a turn as it goes more into a survival adventure direction towards the second half, but all in all, it's a solid film that is well directed, well acted, by both Ben Foster and Dennis Quaid. I may sound like a broken record, but this is another film that I recommend going into not knowing much about and just let it take you on the ride. There's even a twist at the end that you probably won't see coming.
Finish it!
Number 1. Dog Soldiers is a 2002 British action horror film written, directed, and edited by Neil Marshall in his feature directorial debut. Starring Sean Pertwee, Kevin McKidd, Emma Cleesby, and Liam Cunningham, the film follows a squad of soldiers fighting to survive an attack by a pack of werewolves during a military training exercise in the Scottish Highlands. Now for me, well, this is one of my all-time favorite movies. I read a reviewer's remarks today that kinda summed it up better than I believe even I can. Taste of Cinema's writer David Harkin stated that Dog Soldiers ditches the drama of the original Wolfman of the 1940s and pushes Dog Soldiers into aliens territory as 7-foot lycanthropes besiege a tiny cottage while macho soldiers fight for their lives. This movie is plain and simply great. The acting is top-notch, with such notable actors as Liam Cunningham, who plays Davos Seaworth in Game of Thrones, and Sean Pertwee, who is known for such films as Equilibrium and Event Horizon. He also played Alfred Pennyworth on the Gotham television series. Kevin McKidd does a great job as the leading protagonist of the film. It honestly blows me away that he didn't get more opportunities to star in leading roles like this one throughout his career. For me, seeing him stuck doing Grey's Anatomy since 2008 kind of feels like an underutilization of the talents he put forth in this film. Now, I know this film has a pretty large cult following, but I still ultimately feel like this movie is extremely underrated, and if there's one film in this entire list that you decide to give a chance, please make it this one. Director Neil Marshall would go on to direct another one of my favorite horror films, The Descent, which I have to give a shout out to as well. The Descent, still to this day, is one of the scariest and most claustrophobic films of the last 18 or so years. So, to ultimately wrap everything up, the direction, acting, and practical effects in this film are great, and you will ultimately fall in love with the extremely personable and diverse set of characters. At the end of the day, I can't recommend this film more than I already have.
Bloody loving this, aren't you?
So, with all that said, thank you all for tuning in to another episode. I know once again this video is a bit of a departure from the content that I normally cover on the channel, but I hope you enjoyed and had some fun with it. Also, if you have an underrated horror gem that you think I should see, please leave it in the comment section below. As I always say, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps the channel continue to grow. Also, you can check the description box below and find the link to my merch store. Tons of awesome designs, and the proceeds help fund the channel. I also just started a new membership tier for the channel. It's $2.99 a month and comes with some pretty cool perks, so if that interests any of you, then please go check it out. Also, if you'd like to submit a real-life scary story that you would like featured on an episode on the channel, please do so using the email linked in the description box below. As always, I do all the research, writing, recording, and editing for the channel myself, so anything you do to support the channel is greatly appreciated. And until next time, I will see you all again as we head back into The Cellar.